Hi, and welcome to AMA Puget Sound's Coffee Talk series live on alternating Thursdays, 11 a.m. Pacific time. Our guest today is the one, the only, the Evan Kirstel. How are you today,
Nice.
Evan?
Good. Nice to see you. This is coffee talk, but where's my coffee? I'm missing the coffee part.
I'm sorry. You know what's funny is I drank all my coffee. This is just water.
5 cups a day. That's the max according to the medical experts. So
Oops.
we'll have to do without.
hmm Exactly. We were just saying it's 11 o'clock here in Seattle, and you're about 3 hours ahead. So how's the rest of the day going on the East Coast? And
So far, so good. Yeah. Nice to connect and nice to finally chat after following each other on social media for some time.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are new or um, new to social media, if you don't know who Evan is, oh my goodness, you're new. You should
Do you
be
know who I
following
am? I mean, you know who I am. I mean,
him.
come on, get with the
Yeah,
program here.
yeah. I'm thinking the Will Ferrell Anchorman. I'm kind of a big deal around.
Right. Exactly. That's on my business card.
Yeah. Oh, really?
I'm kidding. No, I don't have business cards. I'm digital. No
Yeah. Who has
cards
business
and
cards?
no events. So what's the point?
Right. Exactly. That's something that we haven't talked about since pandemic in any conversations that I've had is business cards. I stopped using business cards even before the pandemic because I don't have the room for boxes of extra ones to hand them out, and
Well,
LinkedIn has
QR codes. Everyone knows how to use a QR code now that we're all using them in restaurants. So you can just
yeah,
pull out your QR code on LinkedIn or even Twitter has a
exactly.
QR code and point your camera. It's perfect.
Exactly. Or you can send that person an email right away and just continue the conversation while you're still in person.
Absolutely.
There are other ways to do things, but we're here to talk about just all things social media. And
Oh,
first
how
of
many
all,
hours do we have?
we have half of one.
Oh, okay. Well, you said all things, so that would be about nine
So,
hours of discussion. But
okay, condensed, very, very, very
okay.
condensed. But we're both fast talkers, so I think we'll be fine. First of all, I wanted to talk about we before we went live. We were talking about how you're more comfortable kind of behind the camera with your podcast, Talking Heads, and I just wanted to talk about that for a few minutes that you do with Dave Michaels. And how long have you been doing that?
Well, we passed 90 episodes and it's been great. We have a real rhythm and kind of a machine built where we could just churn these things out. Although
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a coach who does podcasting among other things,
Mm-hmm.
and he passed his 11,000 episode. So he's been podcasting like since the 80s. It's called, by the way, it's a great podcast, Motivation to Move. And so yeah, he's prolific. I'm semi-prolific in my space, but you know even if it's once a month, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
whatever your cadence is, go out there and do it. Push the button, start recording.
Exactly. Exactly. You don't have to wait for that perfect moment. There is no such thing. You just have to
No,
keep doing it.
no, absolutely.
You're going to get better as you do it. So compared to like the first few episodes that we did, like I'm much less nervous. I'm still nervous, but not nearly. And it goes. I think you're number 21 on our show, so we've got a long
Great.
way
Well,
to
I
go.
hope I won't ruin it. I hope there'll be a number 22.
I haven't
So
ruined
yeah.
it yet, so
Uh,
I think we're good. So what are you with doing the podcast? What are some trends that you're seeing? Because a lot of the guests that you have are in the tech space, folks from Logitech and oh gosh, I was listening to a few of them yesterday and people from
we've had some big guests. We've had like the
yeah.
CEO at Zoom, Eric Wan, who like has become a household name, and the founder of Slack, Stuart Butterfield, and like authors like Cory Doctorow, and at least in the tech world are pretty well known.
hmm
And it's really easy to get people to get on your show now because no one's traveling, going to events like they
Yep.
used to. So
hmm
it's a great format for that.
Absolutely. Are you noticing any patterns with those guests that there any patterns of what they're saying in the tech industry with an overlap in marketing, I guess, especially coming out of this pandemic, yet we're kind of going back into one and the future of work. Are you noticing anything that they're saying?
No, nothing's happening. It's all quiet.
hmm
Nothing to. Just kidding. I am. It's so disruptive and so challenging. People are
hmm
really just trying to navigate and figure it out. Like no one has this master plan or playbook anymore. People are having to reinvent themselves, the business, the structure, the organization.
Mhm.
Even now, we expected to go kind of back to the office in a big way.
Yeah.
That's being upturned with Delta.
Mhm.
So everyone is really focused on kind of the day to day almost of tactically navigating through your, personally, professionally, and otherwise this pandemic. So it's interesting. Everyone has kind of a different approach or a different spin or take on work and the future of work, but most of the CEOs in our space, which is communications, enterprise tech, and they're all in on remote work. So Twitter just announced, we're not going to go back to the office really at all. And
Mhm.
Salesforce has done a similar thing. Microsoft, Google,
Oh, yeah.
all announced an extension of remote working. And by and large, employees want it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that seems to be the writing on the wall.
And what's fascinating, I'm seeing, especially in the banking and the finance industry, some of those CEOs are saying, "Nope, you have to come back to the office." And it's interesting what we're going to see over this next year of that kind of the tug of war of what roles have to be in office and what roles can stay at home, or at least a hybrid model.
Well,
If you're a seller.
the vaccines kind of play a role too, because we don't have vaccine passports. No one knows really who's vaccinated. You can't really ask in some cases.
Mhm.
Google has just mandated
Yep.
vaccinations for all its employees, which
Mhm.
is a big deal. But again, how do you enforce and track that? So in the meantime, you're going to have this sort of two-tier world: people in workplaces who are vaccinated, people who aren't, who are probably going to have to be tested on as part of their job spec, as
Yeah.
well as kind of mask up again. So it's going to be a very chaotic world. In the meantime, companies are working pretty seamlessly remote distributed.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of lessons to learn about the new world of work and
Mhm.
tools like this and others that enable all that.
Right. One thing I will say with the whole, tracking vaccinations and everything, I have 11-year-old sons going into sixth grade in a month.
Wow, that's a tough one.
Yeah. And they've had to be fully vaccinated. They have to be up to date on all of their vaccinations. And that's been the way when I was
Except for COVID, right? I mean, COVID
right,
is
right.
that's below the threshold.
Yeah.
And that's
You're
the
not going.
challenge with this Delta is kids
Mhm.
can now
Mhm.
catch it and
Mhm.
spread it,
Yeah.
and we don't really understand the implications of that yet. So it's
Mhm.
a tough time.
It is. I did see good news from Pfizer
There's
that
good news. So I didn't
there
know
is
that.
good news for kids 5 to 11, which affects me. Um, that Pfizer is very close to working with the FDA to have the vaccine ready for 5 to 11-year-olds by the end
Oh,
of
that's
September.
great.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
And of
So
course, the anti-vaxxers will catch on to that as as being diabolical. But
that's
yeah, no, kids are at risk in many
yes.
cases of with immunocompromised and other issues of some issues around COVID, even though they haven't been the brunt of the challenge.
Hmm.
But yeah, such a challenging world. So good luck with back to school.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. Yeah, calling the doctor as soon as they're ready to have the vaccine. Like, all right, let's go. So they're ready to go back, definitely. But we're not doctors and we're not in the health field.
I
So
do play one on TV though, although I'm not a doctor.
ooh,
I do. Yes, I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
there you go. So you've been working for a while, and social media is still kind of it's not new, but it's newer. When did you pivot to from your sales and business development background into social media and kind of that becoming your focus?
Well, it's funny. I was on social over a decade ago, a dozen years ago, on Twitter, and started on LinkedIn using it as more than just a Rolodex, and think, hey, I could tweet updates to my colleagues and share news stories. And so I was doing that about a dozen years ago, and it really snowballed since then into a side hustle while I was working at Oracle, and then into a profession as I lined up like dozens of different clients. And it's no looking back, and very happily outside of the corporate rat race, as it were, although many of my clients are corporations. So I shouldn't call them rats or rat
Right.
masters, but happily outside of corporate life.
Hmm.
as a kind of solopreneur. And I'd encourage everyone that's listening, take your skills, your knowledge, your ambitions, and take it outside of the traditional workplace, because there's so much appetite for
Hmm.
any skill or any service that can be delivered digitally now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I have to insert, as a past president of this organization, that volunteering, if you're looking to skill up in certain areas, volunteering with an organization can really help you do that, simply because they're not your boss. You're not going to get fired. You can try out some cool things that you normally wouldn't be able to do in your normal day-to-day job. So I highly recommend people volunteer. So I have
Yeah,
to,
volunteer, and good, and so many great causes. So many causes need
yeah,
help,
exactly.
particularly with if you're an accountant or a bookkeeper or a
Lawyer.
animal trainer. I mean, there's just so many company organizations that need your expertise,
Yep.
and they also need digital skills. So I love volunteering, offering help with to charities and other companies who just need my audience. So all it's very feels great to do that.
It does. It does. It feels good to skill up while you're giving back at the same time. So I love that push for it.
And skilling up now means like watching YouTube videos. It's practically like entertainment now. I mean, people ask me, well, how do I do this or how do I do that? And I'm like, go to Google,
Hmm.
Google it. Go to YouTube, which we're on now, and Google how to
Yeah,
create a LinkedIn ad or a LinkedIn blog. I mean, there's
exactly.
everything there is at your fingertips
Hmm.
on video, which is so easy now to consume and to just sit back and learn, that there's almost no excuse to not educating yourself and learning and extending your skill set.
Exactly. Exactly. It's just pick something that you've always been interested and just go for it. Right now, I'm learning more about fashion history. So that's been really fascinating. So there's
Wow,
a lot you
that's
can
a
do.
whole other podcast.
It really, yes, it is. I am not going to get into it. I'm not going to be one of those. I'm not going to get into sewing. I just enjoy watching it. So,
Well, a small diversion. I enjoy looking at old videos from the last century, the 19th century in particular, and
me
the
too.
companies are using AI to stitch together and interpolate the videos from, the even like the 1860s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and
It's,
you can then watch in very good quality video like all the fashion they used to wear in the
mhm,
19th century and the clothes and the
mhm.
hats, and really fun to do. So
Yeah.
today's Throwback Thursday on Twitter, hashtag Throwback Thursday, where you tweet about history and topics from the
Mm.
past. So that's a great topic to tweet about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of posting content to Twitter and other platforms, what what are you finding that people are really gravitating towards? Because anybody who does follow you, you post a lot of really cool, engaging content, just little snippets, information, news, video clips. What are you seeing that has traction? What do you
Whatever
think?
has traction is whatever you're passionate about, because it's about attracting like-minded, like-interested people. So if you're attracted to a fashion history, you
Hmm.
will find hundreds of thousands, millions of people interested in hashtag fashion history. And
Hmm.
so it's not about trying to find something to tap into or what are the topics I should tweet about. Just tweet about your personal and professional interests, even how no matter how obscure or niche they are, and you'll find your tribe, you'll find your community. And so that's the best thing about social. It's not always the trends or the hot stories or hot topics, but just sharing what you're interested in and connecting and networking with people who have those similar interests. And so that's what's great about social media, in my opinion.
Sure, and that's another great way to bring about your own authenticity. And a lot of people just want to be themselves, and Twitter can be a great way to just let yourself be yourself and bring your true identity to that platform with the things that you post. And I think that's really great. Sometimes it does feel like you're just yelling into the void.
Well, it's also about social listening. Listening is social listening on Twitter. And so you can follow, let's say, hashtags like fashion or fashion
Mhm.
history, fashion tech. I'm kind of actually interested in fashion tech, wearables and devices and that
Yeah.
actually look good. And you can listen to other people, other commentators, media journalists, analysts on those topics based on the keywords and the hashtags that you search for on Twitter. Everyone thinks Google search is the only search engine. Actually, no, there's a search engine on Twitter.
Mhm.
And so by listening to what people are saying, you can tap into conversations. You can add commentary and reply and like and share. And so social media isn't about posting. I mean, most of what I do, I post a lot, but I'm actually listening and consuming as much as I post.
Mm-hmm. And so, since you've been on social media for so long, and there's an etiquette to it, and it feels as though sometimes it's just kind of an unspoken etiquette. And I was curious, have you noticed anything that we should be aware of with just being nice, I guess, on Twitter, or not just Twitter, but LinkedIn, Instagram?
Yeah, I think what what I enjoy doing is not making social all about myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that's etiquette or just best practice.
Mm-hmm.
If you really want to build an audience, if you're just talking about yourself, doing the selfie thing all the time, all about you, that's not that. You're not that interesting. I mean, I'm sorry to say. And so making it about other people, other people's content, other people's stories and news, and adding your perspective, that's how you get people's attention. So
Mm-hmm.
if you do the thing where every tweet is about something you're doing, you're just not going to get traction because there's always someone more interesting or newsworthy or out there than you. So I'm always curating, sharing content, and that gets a ton of engagement on social media.
Mm-hmm. And excuse me, when it comes to social media, because that's what we're talking about, is there anything that you're seeing with any B2B customers that you have and what they're doing to invest in social media now that we're kind of out of the pandemic, going back into the pandemic? Are you seeing anything that they're attracted to with investing on social media? Or are they taking a step
Yeah,
back?
and oh no, they're really doubling down because there's
Okay.
nowhere else to go. I mean, you don't have events, you don't have the gatherings, the
Mm-hmm.
in-person stuff that we're all used to at the scale that we had it. So anything that encourages engagement is really a hot topic, whether it's live like this, whether it's LinkedIn Live or Twitter chats that encourages real-time interaction, whether it's Clubhouse that's conversational or Twitter Spaces, a social audio. Anything that drives real engagement with person to person and community is really interesting to brands. And so polls and social commerce, that kind of thing is an interesting, fun, entertaining content. So traditional advertising is just being ignored. So doing something different to really stand out is something brands are really keen to work on.
Sure. So with investing, are they just automatically, are they spending more on ads than they did previous or even during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think definitely if you look at Twitter's results, they were off the charts. So,
Mhm.
brands are spending more on paid, but, they're doing much more organic content creation and organic social as well, which is about the quality of the interactions and the content versus, just pushing advertisements. So it's both. I mean, the pandemic has given a huge boost to digital across the board, right?
Sure.
And so
Has
that's only going to continue.
Absolutely. Has it become easier then because of what we've been dealing with and having to go digital and virtual? Is it easier to convince um, some B2B clients or just some clients in general that normally wouldn't invest in digital? Is it easier to convince them now to invest in it, or are they still kind of dragging their feet a little?
I'd say it's easier for me. I mean, not to
For you.
toot my own horn, but my business doubled, during the pandemic, which is kind of a little shocking and a little guilty about that. But in general, it's also noisier than ever. So there are more people than ever engaging and posting, and so organic reach is kind of dying. Because there are just so many more voices on social media. So
Mhm.
it's really hard to stand out, and most brands are kind of lost.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
just not getting seen and heard, and so it's a real dilemma for everyone outside of like the big tech companies, who of course dominate social: Google, Microsoft,
Mhm. Yeah.
Amazon, etc.
Exactly. And just a side note, watch our video with Rand Fishkin where we talk about Google and Facebook and what they're doing with all that ad revenue. It's interesting. So we're gonna just take a future look. Just I'm not saying a perfect world. I'm just saying in the future, let's say 2 to 3 years from now, pandemic under control. Again, maybe I'm living in a perfect world. Everything is under control. We can go back to, I don't want to say normal because that will never happen. But we
Yeah, the
go
new normal or the next normal, some people are
yeah,
calling it.
new
Yeah.
era. Yeah. What are you seeing then? We've talked about the show, traditional media going forward and digital media going forward. When we can go back in person again for good, what are you seeing with the digital world? How is it going to really expand? Is it going to contract? Are we going to go back to traditional marketing?
I think traditional marketing has a role, but the web and internet and digital is going to be much more interesting and immersive and engaging to the point where in a mixed reality mode or with spatial audio or VR, whatever Oculus, 6 might look like, a couple generations ahead. It's just going to be much easier to engage digitally to the point where the value of all this travel we used to do is a big question mark. I mean, beyond being a boondoggle and drinking and partying with your friends in Vegas, the business value, at least the business ROI,
Mm-hmm.
will be a big debate question mark. And we've already seen that we can get people to use video to collaborate, to do live activations. And this technology isn't staying still. It's getting better and better, and the audio video quality, and we have 5G, and we have content creators who are doing amazing things.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea we're going to all go back to billboards and pamphlets and that kind of thing isn't likely. But I think smaller, focused, more intimate events that have real value, that are hybrid, I think will really thrive because people want to get back
Yeah.
to meeting people. But I don't know if we're going to the scale we did. Like I was at CES 2 years ago
Mm-hmm.
at the cusp of the pandemic, 150,000 people or something. I mean, that was just kind of outrageous to think about. So I don't see some of the mega events, South by Southwest, being able to kind of be repeated in a meaningful way because people have changed their mindsets, their wallets, their interest in travel maybe has kind of shifted.
Mm-hmm. That's really fascinating. And that's not something I thought about with the big events, that maybe just more regional and local.
Regional and better hybrid. We're getting good
Yeah.
at this hybrid stuff where you can have people participating remotely, where there's really good live remote participation. We're going to have an Apple glasses or an Oculus experience that's going to get really good over the next couple of years. And
Mm,
so if you can participate without actually being there, I think you will,
yeah.
by the way, for a fraction of the price and the
Mm,
cost as
right,
well.
right. And you still get a swag bag and all that fun stuff. And I'm curious then, because the first thing that comes to my mind, because before the pandemic, in marketing, event marketing, it was FOMO. Make Get those people to want to come, and they're going to pay the ticket. They're going to come to the event, and the people that didn't come, they're going to feel really bad about it. And what are you seeing now with this hybrid model? Are we going to see more of that FOMO of going to the physical event, or do you think, or just FOMO from missing the event, period? Or do you think there's going to be a divide of like, oh, you only went to the digital event, big deal. I went to the real one. Do you think there's going to be that kind of a divide, or people are going to be nicer about it?
No, I think it's going to be really possible for people to get a piece of the event and benefits of networking and meeting people on these digital platforms. I already have there's an app called Lunch Club AI where I meet new people twice a week for lunch over video, and AI matches us up based on interests. And I find on Twitter, LinkedIn, I'm constantly meeting and networking, and in a way that I didn't do before the pandemic, when a lot of people were on the road, half the time, and were kind of not that engaged. So I
Yeah.
think there's so much more can be done digitally that we haven't even
Mm-hmm.
taken hold of. Social audio really has just kind of become a thing over the last year,
Mm-hmm.
and people are really digging it. I'm loving Clubhouse and meeting and interacting with people live
Mm-hmm.
in a voice format. Podcasting is really going mainstream
Yeah.
in B2B as well, not just in the big consumer side of things, and so people are getting their fill in terms of content and learning and education. And
Yeah.
yes, it would be nice also to get back in person, but maybe in a different way.
Exactly. Exactly. And soon we're gonna have holograms. It'll be fine.
And yeah, you joke, but I definitely have seen like the early versions of holograms and
Hmm.
holographic communications, and it's pretty cool. So you just got to fast forward 5 years to think how great it's going to be
I
at that
know.
time.
And I'm thinking back from when I was a kid, watching Star Trek and the Jetsons, and like, oh, that's going to be hopefully sometime in my lifetime.
Yeah,
We
no,
are.
it's all it's
Just
all
said
it's all
5
coming.
years out. Good gravy. Speaking of tech, because we're talking about tech as well as marketing, and how sometimes those teams work together well, marketing and tech. How can they really work together best? Because they're coming from two different backgrounds. They're coming from two different, I don't want to say dialects, but they each have their own separate language. And I was just curious from your perspective, since you've kind of overlapped on both, how can those teams work together really well?
Yeah, it's a tough one. There's some new study I saw. I don't know if it was Bain or McKinsey or whoever, but the CMO route to being a CEO is kind of the less likely route now than ever, because a lot of the marketing heads aren't embracing and educating themselves on the tech fast enough to keep up in that leadership role. So a lot of the CTOs and CIOs and the more tech savvy people are kind of working their way to CEO, versus the marketing and sales route, which was a very traditional route to become a business leader.
Hmm.
So I think I see a lot of CMOs who are frankly falling behind in being the thought leader for emerging tech, and it's become more the developer, the engineer who's learning about marketing, and which is taking a very data driven approach to it, by the way,
Sure, sure.
and they're rising up even faster than the traditional marketing folks. So
Okay.
I think there's this comfort level that a lot of marketing folks don't necessarily have with data and big data analytics,
Mhm.
and some of the new, let's say, platforms that are emerging for marketing that aren't just about like creativity. This isn't like a Mad Men world where you can be like creative and come up with some cool new idea. If you're
Yeah.
in marketing, you're in data now. I mean, you have to learn a whole new set of skills and tools and
Hmm.
system thinking, and a lot of the traditional marketing folks aren't really comfortable with that.
It's
So yeah, big change.
absolutely, it's become more of a, not necessarily project manager, but it's definitely a jack of all trades role now, rather than, like you said, just the creative. Just, I've only been in marketing for the last 10, 11 years. I was in retail before that. And just the change I've seen in the last 10 years is amazing. Not just the switch from traditional into digital, but just what marketers have to know and do now. So it sounds as though, from your perspective, if a marketer wants to really go further and really help the organization, just to learn some more tech skills. Um,
Yeah, and it's again, it's very doable. Whether it's getting certifications on HubSpot and Salesforce and some of these tools, or just being more open to collaborating with the technologists,
mhm.
and learning from them, and I think it's going to be a shift in thinking for sure. I think
Absolutely.
half of all marketing or advertising is Google,
Mhm.
Facebook, and Amazon, right? I mean,
Much.
that's pretty much the marketplace. And if you're not a skilled practitioner on those three platforms,
Mhm.
I'm not sure what you're doing in marketing, in tech marketing at least.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So yeah, that I completely agree with that. And there were times where I wasn't quite sure I understood something. So, like we were talking about earlier, YouTube.
Right.
So yeah, that's where you go and learn from other people who have done it, have the experience. And Google, like you said, they have a great certification suite. You can learn almost everything or anything now with Google, and it's a great start. And then you start finding those communities of other people who are learning the same thing as you, and you just build from there. So,
Exactly.
absolutely. I knew this was going to happen. We're nearly at time, and I feel like we just started. So
Well, happy to come back. And, the
absolutely.
beauty of social media and Twitter in particular is that we can have like this water cooler conversation. So you can tweet
Yeah.
at me, tweet at both of us, and we can go back and forth on other topics and
Mhm.
questions. And join Clubhouse. There are a ton of marketing rooms around best practices where we can chat real time as well, anytime.
Yep. Yeah, I need to get back in there. It's like staring at me on my phone, and I just need to get
Well, you
back.
got to find, there's a lot of nonsense there as well, but there's some good tribes, some good communities and rooms.
Absolutely.
So find two or three that work for you, and I just do two or three rooms that I'm really find the like-minded people, and
Mhm.
made some great relationships there. So like anything else, kind of be selective about
Mhm.
about how you spend your time.
Exactly. And speaking of, I have like 8 invites on Clubhouse. If anybody needs any, just hit me up.
Oh, it's open up now. Just opened up, so you don't need an invite anymore.
Yeah,
It's,
fine.
Android and iOS are now just opened
I'm not that special then. I added invites at one point. So as we're wrapping up, I do want to say we have all of your information down in the description, as well as the podcast with Dave Michaels. Before we go, is there anything else that you want our audience to know?
No, I'd love for you to just follow me on Twitter and subscribe to my newsletter. If you don't have time for all this nonsense, just subscribe to my newsletter, and I summarize the top dozen or two stories 3 times a week, so you have it in one concise place. So
Yeah,
uh, easy peasy.
lemon squeezy. Excellent, Evan. Thank you. Really, really, really thank you. I appreciate your time, especially the time difference, but it was such a thrill to talk to you, and we'll probably definitely have you back again very, very
Thank
soon.
you. I'll take it. All right, Julie.
Awesome. Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.